Hello and welcome to this edition of Crossover. I'm Chi Xiaojun with Charlotte and Lily.
Yeah, we're not done with fashion yet.
Okay. Well, we had one episode talking about the evolution of, say, fashion in China in past decades, and we started in the 1950s on to the 60s. We were not quite finished with the 60s, and actually, we were also trying to give you a picture of what's happening in China, and at the same time, what's happening in the West. It seems obviously the two cultures, the two countries are going in two different directions at the time.
At that time, yeah, because China still wasn't that connected to
the world.
other cultures and countries.
Yeah.
Right.
But in the 70s, you were born.
Yeah, I wasn't actually quite finished with the 60s yet.
What else do we have?
Well, remember, that was in the chaotic period in China, in the Cultural Revolution period. Was a very big fashion at the time. If you had a Chairman Mao's medal, everyone was wearing something like that.
Oh, a button.
A button.
A pin or a button.
Pin. They're still being sold now.
Yeah, you can still
But
find
these
them.
years, it's like, it's become a collector's item.
Yes.
It's not, you wouldn't wear something like that, but...
I might, really.
Okay.
It depends on,
maybe for
what clothes
different
I'm
occasions.
wearing,
but
yes.
in the market, you would only see it and buy it in the antique market. But you don't know whether these are the truly original ones.
Right.
It could be newly made ones
Yes, I
solely
think so.
for the market.
Yeah.
I guess we don't really have a real exact number of how many paintings of this kind was produced at the time. I guess it would be like in maybe hundreds of thousands.
Maybe.
I would
or
say
even
maybe
more than that.
hundreds of millions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe everyone had one and they could just wear it.
Yeah,
probably.
and the sizes and the design could be different. Some of them very delicately made and could be indeed a collector's item.
Yeah. I think maybe my father still kept one. I need to go back and just try to dig it out and see what it looks like.
Yeah, could be worth something.
I remember playing with one when I was little, and I asked my father, "Who is this?" Because I didn't know. So I think maybe he's still keeping it.
Yeah, and in those revolutionary years, again, soldiers, army, anything connected with the army.
Yeah, we
was
could see
seen
in
as a
movies
fashion.
and in TV dramas that people were going back to wear army uniforms basically during that time.
Sailors' uniform, sailors' T-shirt.
Yeah,
the blue and white stripes. You can't tell from this picture because it's black and white, but I think that's pretty universal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so.
The sailor shirts or scarves, things like that.
Yeah.
I remember we were talking about the coming of fashion, different elements in clothes. This is coming back, actually.
Yes.
In China, you'll see lots of people wearing something like that.
Yes, it is.
And it could be very expensive if you want to buy something like that. Yeah.
Again, we really shouldn't have given away all the old clothes. We should have kept them, even from our parents' generation. They would look good now.
A lot of people in the States, anyway, a lot of families will keep their clothes and give them to their children. And I have some of my mom's clothes from when she was young.
Wedding gowns?
Wedding gown, but that's different. That's more of a tradition as opposed to just regular clothing.
Right. Well, this is a hat. It's very much like a soldier's hat with the red star.
Yes.
But if you go, say, visiting the Great Wall, if you have a tour of the Great Wall, and there you would see lots of peddlers and those businessmen trying to sell you this. But you wouldn't see a Chinese wearing a green hat.
Oh, no.
These days, no. Well, okay, we have to talk about this.
Explain this.
Talk about this.
Do not wear a green hat in China.
Not a guy.
Well, but an army hat's different.
They're different. I mean, they have different
But
functions anyway.
in general, green hats they have a bad connotation. If someone, especially if a man wears a green hat
Basically,
in China,
it's more about a man,
there's a bad connotation.
Say it.
It means your wife is
having an affair.
cheating on you. So you'll say you're wearing a green hat. It means your wife's cheating on you. So it's not good to wear green hats.
No.
Who would buy it?
I don't know. I don't know why they want to.
Probably some young kids these days
Who don't
They don't
care
care about
about
that.
the old
or they're
fashioned,
trying to be
different.
Yeah.
Well, we've been talking about the evolution of fashion in China in the past decades, and we won't quite finish. Then we talked about what's happening in the 50s and 60s in China, and also what's happening in the West. And we'll see basically the two countries and two worlds were going in two different directions. So let's move on now to
the 70s. Yeah. You
when
were born.
I was born. Right.
By the end of the 70s, I think, is when the directions
Are starting to
slowly
close up.
starting to
Yes,
converge.
exactly. That's when China adopted the opening up policy. So China opened the door. The interaction between China and the West started
Started to happen. Yes.
So more pictures and we'll see how that is happening. We are seeing actually some pictures reflecting what's happening in the 80s. The first picture, that was actually a cover of a magazine called Fashion. Pictures of, say, the ready suits.
Ready-made.
Ready-made
And
clothes.
presented by models.
And presented by models. So
That's interesting because if you look at the pose of the model in the middle, up middle, you know, the way she posed, that was quite an old-fashioned way of posing.
And actually, I have to just point out her scarf that she's wearing, that kind of chiffon or chiffon-like
Like transparent,
material was very popular in the 80s. And when we moved to China in 88, granted, we were in Nanjing, so we weren't in Beijing or Shanghai, which might have been a little more fashion-forward. Those scarves were still very popular to have the very sort of chiffon-like scarf.
But talking about the second picture, the centerpiece is not the scarf, it's not the pose.
Sunglasses?
The sunglasses.
The big sunglasses. They're coming back in style too.
And we do have a very special name for it. They're called hamajing. It's like the frog-shaped
frog's eyes.
sunglasses.
Sunglasses. Well, and I know in the States in the 80s, big sunglasses were very popular. And 70s as well, actually.
And now it's coming back.
Yeah.
In the 80s, it was also the time when imported products were available at the time. So lots of these glasses, they're supposedly from Hong Kong or from other countries. And in order to show you, this is an imported product, remember, there's always that little trademark on the
side and on the legs.
Sunglasses.
Yes, but sometimes you'd see it on the actual lens. People would leave the
in the corner.
sticker or the
They'll leave it there.
You're
on the
supposed to
lens.
take it off, right?
Of course, yeah. But they'd leave it on, so everyone would know that this was...
you've got an imported one. Wow. And the same thing is happening to the suits.
That's right. I was just going to say, although that I think was later
on the
in the 80s and maybe even in the early 90s as well, on men's suit. The sleeves of their suit coats, there'd be a label, which I think comes with a lot of suit coats, but you're supposed to cut the label off.
That's right. I mean, if it is a huge brand, leave it there.
People would leave it on, and you could also buy labels to sew
that
on your sleeve.
I'm not aware of.
Yes,
That's
you could.
interesting.
Yes, you could.
On the left side, you see that picture and showing, it's like a craze of Western-style suits.
Yes.
Yeah, more Western influenced.
And people learn to put on ties, wearing suits, and learn to, how many buttons you should button and how many buttons you should unbutton when you're wearing suits.
As you said, and this is the time when you see the two lines coming closer to each other.
Right, but I think traditionally, because at least starting from the 50s, men didn't really wear ties because it was a lot of army influence and, Mao jacket influence.
You don't have to wear
a tie.
No.
So a lot of the ties you saw in the 80s were clip ties.
Oh.
You couldn't, it was harder to find regular, ties that you tie a knot than it was to find it's ready-made, and then you just clip it on.
Talking about that ready-made ties, I have...
You had one?
No, not... I don't have one, but I do have another story about the ready-made shirts. We'll talk about that after a short break. You're watching Crossover. We've been talking about the evolution of fashion in China and past decades. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Crossover. We've been talking about the changes that have been happening in China in the fashion world.
Yes.
In the fashion industry. Well, actually, in the way people dress ourselves, or say the perceptions about fashion in China. Just now you were saying the ready-made
The clip-on ties.
The clip-on tie. Remember, at the time, we wear mouth suits. That means the upper part of your body was totally covered by, because you have that button
high
here.
collar, yeah.
Yeah, it's all covered. But it's a fashion that you see a little bit of the shirt that you wear.
The collar.
Inside the collar. But the thing is, people at the time, they couldn't afford all of those. That many shirts.
Oh. So you have a fake collar?
Yes.
The collar was real.
Okay.
It's a fake shirt.
Kids had that too. I remember because also I remember when we first came to China, it was considered more formal if you had a collar.
Yes.
If you wore a shirt with a collar than if you just wore a collarless shirt.
Yeah.
And you could buy these little.
Yes, I had those sleeves and collars.
You put them on almost like a vest, and but it was mostly just to have the collar, and some of them were beautiful.
Yes.
Like you'd have these little, things. The vest part wasn't supposed to be shown. It wasn't a proper shirt.
Right.
But the collars, lacy collars and embroidered collars, and really beautiful.
That's for
I
girls.
think it's quite smart, actually. You don't have to buy a whole set, buy a whole shirt. But if you wear like the same sweater, but wear a different color, it will just give you a different look.
Well, and these days you can find in some clothing brands will make a sweater with a collar that's sewn into the neckline of the sweater so that you don't have to have a shirt on under your sweater. So the same thing still happens today. Also, I think one of the reasons, especially for kids, why collars, having a collar was so important was so that you could wear your red pioneer scarf.
Oh, yes.
Right.
You fit the scarf under your collar, and you have the little triangle in the back and the little scarf in the front.
Yeah.
And if you didn't have a collar, it didn't work as well.
But basically, you
Right.
wear it anyway.
I think we were required to wear something with a collar, actually, in order to wear the red scarf. And to me, another reason would be it's easier to wash, because the collar is usually like the dirtiest part of your shirt.
That's
and
true.
As kids, we play around, we get sweatered, and after one day, a white shirt collar could just turn to yellow or turn to black. And it's so much easier for my mom just take it off and wash that little piece of clothes rather than wash the whole thing.
So, can I just take it off now?
Yeah, maybe.
All right, some more pictures, please. On the top side, top right. That's actually a cover of a magazine at the time.
大众 film.
Or movies
like that.
for all. It was very popular at the time. Remember, there is a major major film festival. We still have that these days, and that's actually initiated by that company, by that magazine. At the time, the ballots.
That's true. The ballots were included in the magazine.
Yeah,
So
you have to have one magazine to vote.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. I remember talking about that.
100 Flower Award.
Yeah.
Basically it's based on the votes of the readers of that magazine.
Yeah.
In those magazines you will see pictures of these beautiful young women, and that was movie stars. And at the time it was kind of a controversial. And critics say, why do you only include pictures of these young beautiful women, like actresses or singers? Why don't you include pictures of these working women?
Well, it's called a
people from
movie,
different places,
film.
different walks of life. It's like a discrimination. But at the time, remember, that was in the early period of the opening up policy. Maybe they were still a bit reserved.
They were still adapting and adjusting to.
I know. It's still conservative, and it's just natural for people to have complaints like that.
Yeah.
Fashion shows are just something normal you would accept in a daily life.
Every day
For a
with a red carpet.
fashion week, fashion festival, it's just there. Lots of beauty pageants, different versions organized by different people.
Happens everywhere.
Yes.
On campuses, even within companies, maybe.
You know, there are three major ones like Miss World, Miss Universe, Miss International,
I think.
And there are lots of
could never
other
really tell the difference.
Miss Tourism or whatever.
Yeah.
A lot of them, the finals are now being held in China. But in those early years, in the 80s, that was actually the first time people would see something like a beauty pageant.
Yeah.
Young women wearing swimming suits
and doing
walking on the
catwalks.
runway.
But getting back to the 80s, when we first moved to Nanjing, it wasn't very colorful. Clothing wasn't very colorful unless you were looking at children. But grown, adult women and men both didn't have much color variety in their clothing. And when Nanjing is a city that loves to rain. So when it rained, everyone would be on their bicycles and they'd have ponchos, to wear when they rode their bicycles.
Raincoat.
It was always navy blue, army green, pretty much navy blue and army green when we first arrived in '88. And we watched, it was really interesting, we watched the sort of integration of color in fashion happen through observing rain ponchos. Because what happened was navy blue and green, and then there was red. And then from red there was purple. And then you started seeing patterns like polka dots on the ponchos and stuff. And so then by about the mid-90s, I mean, there were all kinds of colors and everything. But it was really interesting to watch that progression take place.
Did the clothes you brought from the States back then, did they surprise your classmates, your friends?
Not from my sister and for me, but my mom actually had a bit of an interesting time. She was in her mid-30s when we arrived, and she had a number of bright red sweaters and coat, and she was told that she shouldn't really be wearing so
too
much
colorful.
red because she wasn't a young girl.
Oh.
So for a while, she put her bright red. I mean, I'm talking very, very bright red. She put them away. Just to be culturally sensitive.
Yes.
You don't want to shock people by wearing this bright red sweater.
Obviously, your mother's friend at the time was doing that, with a good sense.
Oh, absolutely. Being very nice. I mean,
being kind.
Being kind. Yeah, we wanted to be culturally sensitive. You don't want to shock people.
Interesting story. And we'll take another short break. We've been talking about the changes that have been happening in China in the past decades about fashion, or about the fashion sense. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Crossover. So all these changes happening, and in the 80s and 90s, especially in the 90s, we see the two lines, they used to be in two totally different directions,
and now they're
starting
closer
to merge.
Yes.
And
I remember back in the 90s, we were already wearing jeans. So basically...
So you were born finally in the 90s. Jeans, yes.
Yeah, I was wearing jeans as a baby. No, I'm just kidding. But I remember that was when we had the first group of foreign exchange students from the States to Shanghai. And we were so eager to see, are they dressed the different way than we are? And we found there was really not that much differences. It was jeans, T-shirt, everything.
Yeah, by the 90s, or mid-90s anyway. No, early 90s, maybe 93. You started seeing more international brands. Mainly, I think, from Hong Kong brands coming in. And there were some brands, I won't name any names, but there were some brands that said, New York. It had New York after the name, or USA after the name. That we always used to joke and say, well, we've never heard of these.
Right.
Well, the interesting story is with these Chinese noodles chain restaurant. Remember, it's called
the
California beef noodles.
Beef noodles.
I
don't get it.
That's the name of the restaurant, the chain restaurant. But anyway, I mean, after several years of its establishment, after several years, the success of that chain restaurant, it was very successful at the time. And some reporters said, well, I went to California. I've been living there for quite a few years, and I've never seen a restaurant called California beef noodles. But you would have felt actually the influence of Western culture, American culture, maybe through the bridges, like the cities of Hong Kong, Macau, and also Taiwan.
That was a time when people in China, especially people in the urban, in cities in China, were eager to learn about the Western culture and the Western way of living. So when anything, they put a Western or a USA title somewhere around it, people might think, wow, this is new and we should try it out.
And that's also, I mean, we've discussed this before in previous episodes, but that's also when fast food, especially
came to China.
Foreign fast food brands really exploded in China,
KFCs and McDonald's
in the Chinese market.
The bottom one is
those
the
are
little
the
tigers from Taiwan. Yeah, we love them.
I'm a great fan.
Yeah, me too.
And that was, they were like the first successful group at the time, and it was the group, the idea of having a singing group was
a boy band.
A boy band. Was being introduced and accepted by music fans on the mainland.
Yeah, they were huge success.
Huge. We owned all of their cassette tapes. Back then it was cassette tapes.
Me too.
We owned all of their cassette tapes. And I think a lot of boy bands, subsequent boy bands, I think we're all very heavily influenced by the Tiger.
No one
Little Tiger
is now as successful as that one.
Yeah, and actually, boys in our class would want to dress up like they were, and actually wanted to change their hairstyle.
Exactly.
That's right. And incidentally, last year's so the Spring Festival, CCTV
Gala.
Spring Festival Gala that happened in 2010, Spring Festival of 2010. Had them
back on the stage.
And this was, I think, the first time they had come back together to perform in,
like, I don't know, 10
over
years,
a decade maybe.
Probably.
And it was just...
It was huge.
Wonderful,
And they said actually
amazing.
Many girls in our age started to cry when they saw them.
Come on.
I've actually,
Girls.
just as a side note, I've done I was involved in a show once, and one of the
which one?
Shy.
Which tiger?
Okay.
The one on the left. No, the one on the right.
No, sorry, it was Cheng Zhipeng.
The
one on the left.
The one on the left. Yeah, he was there performing by himself. And when I saw it was him, and I don't get this way with any, I mean, I'm usually quite calm. I got so excited. And I went up to him and I said, I'm your biggest fan. I have all your cassette tapes and I can sing all your songs. And he looked at me, who are you?
I'll pass on the message. He's a friend. Right, the one on the top left, and basically that picture is more about the jeans, because the brand is Texwood. That was like the first jeans brand, an imported one. Jeans were accepted by young people at the time. My first jeans trousers, first year in my university.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, in those
when
little
was
years.
that?
In the 90s. Anyway, and now things have changed. And when we talk about these big brands, Chinese people are not new to them at all. Actually, big love.
The major fashion houses in
LV,
the fashion industry.
And Chinese people are probably the biggest buyers of these luxury goods these days. They're supporting the development
of the whole industry
of these
world.
luxury brands, even when the world is suffering from the decline of economy.
And actually, there's a huge luxury brand and other brand outlet center going up in between Beijing and Tianjin. That is will be opening this year, and it's unprecedented. It'll be the first of its kind in China with everything, Prada, Gucci, I mean everything, and I'm convinced that they're just going to make so much money. It'll be so popular. Because people are really fashion conscious now. You know, China's a really trendy, in the fashion industry anyway, very trendy country.
And now, if we go back again to the 50s and 60s, we would see two countries, going different directions, and now
they meet.
When we are traveling around the world, we don't really see that much difference in clothing.
No, not at all. Not anymore.
It's quite interesting. You see this global fashion that basically looks all the same in different countries, but they're also localized. And in China, we're having more and more our own designers. And you know, in Asian countries, like in China, in Japan, people like to keep the skin white. So many women would take an umbrella.